At 6 minutes past 9 o'clock, very good morning to you all and welcome to this edition of Views, People and News 0933 KFM. My name is Judith Atim and today we are talking about switching from UMEME to Uganda Electricity Distribution Company Limited, and we're asking what is at stake. And joining me in the studio to discuss this, I have with me Dr. Patricia Litho, who is the Assistant Commissioner Communication at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. Dr. Patricia, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, listeners. Good morning, our moderator and Doctor here, my colleague. I'm really excited to be here today to discuss this issue. We are almost crossing the bridge.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Patricia, for making it here. I am also pleased to be joined by Dr. Fred Muhomuza, Development Consultant and Director at the MOVES Economic Forum. Dr. Muhomuza, good morning. Always a pleasure to have you join us.
Good morning. Happy to be here. Good morning, my fellow panelists and Ugandans out there. We're really headed for the views that affect the people and feed into the news.
Very interesting. And I'll introduce my other guest as soon as he walks in here. But just as usual, we start by looking at the highlights of the week, and then I'll give you each an opportunity to pick one or two issues that you'd like to respond to. And we're starting, of course, with Wednesday morning's heavy downpour, which left at least 7 people dead, hundreds of travelers stranded, lots of property destroyed, and we saw the floods that swept through Kampala and its suburbs. Several structures, including this newly launched Kampala flyover at Queensway, residential houses, industries and roads were left with submerged cars. Offices were flooded, and there was quite a standstill. People could not move. Vehicles were stuck for hours. Still on Wednesday, the newly elected Kawempe North Member of Parliament, Elias Luyimbazi Nalukola, was sworn in from the Speaker's chambers, ending the ping-pong or the delays that followed his victory in the March 13th by-election. The event was attended by the Leader of Opposition, Joel Senyonyi, several MPs from his National Unity Platform Party, and close family members. The Uganda Printing and Publishing Corporation had the previous day finally gazetted Nalukola, whom the Electoral Commission indicated had garnered 17,939 votes, defeating his closest rival, NRM's Farida Nambi, who polled 9,058 votes in a by-election that was largely characterized by violence meted out by security agencies, starting from the nomination day to the final polling day. And on Tuesday, Ugandans, especially sports lovers, were treated to a joyous evening after the national football team, the Uganda Cranes, secured a crucial 1-0 victory over Guinea in a Group G clash of the 2026 World Cup qualifiers at Mandela National Stadium, Nambole. Uganda dominated the early exchanges, creating several scoring opportunities, and in the 36th minute, Alan Okello scored a stunning free kick. The Cranes will return to action on September 1st, 2025, when they host Mozambique in another must-win encounter at Nambole. But again on Wednesday, it emerged that South Sudan First Vice President Riek Machar was under arrest, and yesterday the country's Information Minister Michael Makuei confirmed that Machar is under investigation. His arrest has caused fears that it could intensify the rift between Machar and President Salva Kiir, plunging Africa's youngest nation into more violence. Uganda sent UPDF troops to contain the situation in South Sudan, while yesterday, that's Friday, the Kenyan government sent their former Prime Minister Raila Odinga as a special envoy to help diffuse tensions. Machar's party says his detention has effectively voided a 2018 peace deal that ended a 5-year civil war between Kiir's Dinka forces and the Nuer fighters loyal to Machar. And of course, the biggest story this week is the anticipated UMEME transfer of the electricity mandate to the government's entity, the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company Limited, come the 1st of April 2025, after 20 years of service. But there has been stalemate on the amount of the private company should walk away with, following government's borrowing of $190.9 million as approved by Parliament, while the Auditor General's report indicates that UMEME must be paid $118.3 million, which is significantly lower than the initial amount of about $284 million. The recommendation has sparked concern, and it has caused a lot of questions among stakeholders on how the figures were reached at and the actual buyout amount. The Auditor General, Edward Akol, handed over his report to the Speaker of Parliament, Anita Mong, which also uncovers other shocking discrepancies, including a hidden debt scandal where UMEME owes the Uganda Electricity Transmission Company Limited 42.8 billion shillings as of March 13th, 2025. The report by the Auditor General has also highlighted concerns over the buyout process, with the Auditor General advising the government to ensure that the takeover is done transparently and efficiently. This UMEME buyout stalemate is our top matter of discussion here on VPN. But also relatedly, the Ministry of Finance on Thursday laid on the floor of Parliament the annual budget estimates for the financial year 2025-26 for processing and consideration. The Minister of State for General Duties, Henry Musasizi, tabled the budget totaling to 71,956,621,530,685 shillings. The budget theme is the usual regurgitated one: full monetization of the Ugandan economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation and market access. But on a rather sad note, renowned Ugandan-American journalist and former host of Voice of America's flagship program, Straight Talk Africa, Shaka Sally, was pronounced dead on Thursday. Sally, who died at the age of 71 from Virginia, USA, hosted Straight Talk Africa for over 2 decades, engaging African leaders, analysts, and citizens in critical discussions on governance, democracy, and human rights, with a lot of respect, until he retired in May 2021, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire African journalists and media professionals. And also, the Muslim fraternity is on the lookout for the moon tonight, and once it is sighted, Eid al-Fitr will be observed tomorrow. And if it has not appeared, the holy day will be marked on Monday. It will mark the end of the holy month of fasting in the Muslim faith, Ramadan, whereas the Christians are still carrying on with the Lenten period. And from the VPN crew, we wish our brothers and sisters, our Muslim brothers and sisters, happy Eid. Well, gentlemen, lady, my other guest is here, Honorable Augustine Ruzindana, former IGG, former Member of Parliament, Ruhama County. Honorable, you're most welcome. Former youth, former Gen Z. Always a pleasure to have you joining us, Honorable. Yes.
Good morning, viewers and listeners.
No, even viewers. We're streaming on, we have a digital platform, so we are streaming and people can watch us now.
So I shouldn't yawn.
Okay, and the fellow panelists.
Yes. Good to have you. So just your very quick thoughts. It's been quite a packed week, and I've actually read quite a mouthful of things that happened, but your very quick thoughts. I'll start with you, Patricia. Any?
Good morning again.
Although I would prefer we don't go into UMEME now. We come into UMEME later.
Yes. Good morning, and I'm spoiled for choice, but I'll go for the floods. Why? For many reasons, but most importantly because it took the heat away from my corner, and people started now to talk about the floods, the failed infrastructure, but mostly really the pain and the loss of life that came with that, and what we could have done better. How prepared are we? How serious are we about the state of our infrastructure? The population is growing. Are we improving? In a way, I also felt sorry for the new management at KCCA. They just appeared on the scene and suddenly they're in trouble. And yet this has been ongoing. So we need to think a bit more about our planning. We need to really observe the regulations we put in place for observance of where to construct. We need to pay attention to our drainage system. Kampala or Uganda isn't the first place to flood. There are other countries that flood. I think the point really is that must we lose lives when it floods? Must it be very devastating? But also our response rate when it floods. Some people couldn't get to work, others couldn't get home. And even this morning, trying to make my way here from where I live, you find that even the tarmac road is now full of mud. Even our response to cleaning that maybe could be better. So for me, it's a point of reflection. And one of the things maybe as government we need to pay more attention to.
Thank you, Patricia. Dr. Muhumuza.
Well, it's a mouthful of things. It speaks to integrated planning. It touches to our space. This time the floods took pressure off our conversation of UMEME. But remember the linkage of power sector and the water sector. We went through it when we did another dam in Jinja, parallel to the other. They're supposed to be in series. Water covers one, flows into the other one. Now Bujagali and the old dam are okay. But remember we had put another dam there. And before we knew it, Lake Victoria was drying up because we were releasing more water. And then we had the power people need to now get authority from the water ministry to say how much water should we release. So the energy sector and the water sector have been so much linked up. Now this water is supposed to go into Lake Victoria, but not all of it goes at once. When I hear people saying drainage, no, some of these are supposed to be holding grounds. So you don't just build a channel and cement it that water now should rush and go. Because it can't just do that. The volumes that water come on, you still need the swamps like Rubiji. This Nakivubo channel was not just to be a drainage point that water should run, because you're going to rush it and come to Clock Tower. Where does it go? So it was supposed to be draining slowly, remains there. There is an ecosystem aspect. The frogs, a lot of things would stay within that system. And when it flooded, I wasn't here. I was in a country, our neighboring to the south. You can see the roads are good, but the water goes off the road into green spaces. Something like what used to be at Centenary Park. You can put some green there and people can see some swamps and people can see some lakes. Kavaka's Lake here is supposed to be a holding ground. So you can divert some water there, but it's all silted. Nobody bothers. So the water management, the habitation of people and of the ecosystem, and where should people be passing, where should people be staying, is an integrated planning that we really do not have in these spaces. And so for me, that one is a real nightmare. We should not just be saying, where should the water, do drainage. No, it's a bigger thing than that. And then the other part of the arrest of Riek Machar, I've been telling people who we converse with, when you have a war budget, there are certain things, unfortunately, you suspend. Especially, even if it's a very good development project, you have to suspend. Because if you don't, you're going to get into a problem. One of the things Apollo Bote is accused of having not done was to continue investing in the other social education. Of course, some of us survived from that. Investments in education, investments in agriculture, investments in what, and he had not enough money to deal with the war in Luero. And he lost it. Now, the current leaders know very well what that means. So we should recognize Uganda needs a war budget. We are literally at war. We may not have war within our borders, but this is what America has been trying to scale out. They were at war in Ukraine. They were spending lots and lots of monies there, and it has cost them. They were at war in the Middle East. Most of those bombs by Israel were from the US. Now, Trump is trying to say, guys, can we do peace? Now, you have no idea how much money America has saved for these months when there has been no bombs to the scale that they were in Gaza. So now Uganda has deployments in Sudan. We have deployments in the Congo. We have deployments in different places. War guzzles resources. Something has gone to give, it's going to give way. Now, if you don't manage it, it will manage you. So you are going to see more of the defense forces coming and saying, we need more money. We need more money. and now these will turn either into supplementaries, or some entity you had promised to give money will go without money because you have cut their budget. But if you manage it well, then you will not even give people false hope. So the budget that has been presented, you can really say is a proposals and estimates and provisional. Because come next year we also have elections. So you factor in all these kinds of things, and when I look through the draft submissions, I don't see some of these things being reflected, except in an increase in the budget. And remember, they had given us a very low budget. I said, you guys, the smallest budget you can have is like the same we have had this year, 72 trillion. And you can see it has come back. So there are a lot of things that you signal. And as we get into the UMEME conversation, investors in this country are not just discussing UMEME. And those outside the country, they are looking at the signal we are giving, because power sector is at the heart of development. What is your policy? What is your strategy? So those guys are not discussing your transition. Tomorrow will transit. On the other day will be done. But an investor who wants to come and put here a factory is looking at, my factory is going to be in Uganda for 30 years. What are their policies over critical sectors of health, transport, energy, foreign exchange, interest rates, banking? Uganda is not for me. I'll only go there to sell my items. Let me manufacture from Tanzania or even from India, South Africa. As for Uganda, it will just be a roadside kiosk where I'll outlet my things. Let me not get into your conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Muhumuza. Honorable Rosindana.
Let me start with condolences for Shaka Sadi. I think Shaka Sadi, I knew him and I could say he was a friend, but I think he had become a national asset and probably an African asset. He did raise the profile of Africa and of Uganda, and of course, since he always said Kabale kid, I think everybody was knew about Kabale, and it's sad that we lost him when he was still undergoing medical treatment, and we are going to miss him. We are also going to miss Voice of America. I think it has been affected in the USAID in the USAID problems, and I hope his terminal benefits were not affected by
Trump's decisions.
By the USAID problems, but we are missing. We will miss him. I don't know about the arrangements of his burial, whether it will be here, and so condolences to the family and friends and everyone that misses him on the Voice of Africa. Now, with regard to the recent problems with the drainage, and what has happened when the rains came, I think it was opportune that they came. This happened at the time the road works are not yet completed, and probably they can also those who are undertaking the repairs can see where certain things should be modified and so on. But indeed, we have had not only a problem of drainage, but of sewage disposal. The sewage system has never been expanded. It's not just the drainage. No, we all have small things in our compounds, and this can't go on now. Now the structures are getting bigger. There are apartments and so on, and there must be a much bigger system of sewage disposal, and that one is not there. Then I don't know what happened. The machinery that has been on the roads for repairs has disappeared. Since the drainage, you don't see any activity at all. I don't know whether they have gone to regroup or to I don't know what.
But they were not washed away. The machines might have been taken by the floods.
But it's quite something you must notice. There is no work going on, and we need, and yet we need these things to be completed very quickly. My colleague has talked about the budget. It is a budgeting period, and indeed those who are involved in the process have got lots of difficulties. It's a serious situation that the budget, if you are budgeting and you have so many needs and all of them are urgent, you have got problems of where to put resources and they are big things. All these projects and the elections coming, then it's quite a problem. Now, in the last by-election in Kawempe has shown the country that the problems that may be there during the electoral process. But the electoral process is segmented. Now we are going to have primaries in all the political parties, and they have their own problems. And so we should be planning as a society and those who are in the leadership about how to deal with these problems so that there is no impression that the country is not stable. That is disastrous to create an impression that there is a likelihood of instability, or that there is an unstable situation, or things that may not be cannot be handled appropriately by the authorities and so on. So the transition is not just UMEME. We are in various types of transitions, and handling transitions is a very, very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing.
Thank you very much to all of you for your quick thoughts. It's time for us to take a break, and then when we return, we delve into our discussion, switching from UMEME to UEDCL, and we'll be asking what is at stake. This is VPN. We'll be back. Welcome back from the break, and glad you're still with us here on VPN on 933 KFM. My name is Judith Atim. I'm your host. We are discussing the topic switching from UMEME to UEDCL, and we're asking what is at stake. And I'll introduce my guest once again, Honorable Augustine Ruzindana, former IGG, former Member of Parliament for Ruhama County, former youth. And also we have Dr. Fred Muhumuza, who is a development consultant and the director, MOVE's Economic Forum. And last but not least, Dr. Patricia Litho, the Assistant Commissioner, Communication, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. So lady and gentlemen, the question is, what is at stake? But I'll start with you, Patricia. Just an update from the ministry. What Ugandans have been asking, the buzz online is that will UEDCL, which is a state entity, effectively manage power issues? As a consumer, I want to go home and make sure I have light, I can do my cooking, I can watch my TV. My life is not going to be so interrupted or disrupted with this transition. What is your assurance, or what discussions are you having within the ministry when it comes to this UMEME buyout? Are you optimistic that this is going to be smooth for the end user or the consumer? What exactly is at stake for us?
I think the most important thing for the consumer is to understand if they will be able to access, if they will be able to vend. And with those, I give assurances that you won't even know the switch because you're keeping the same meter. You're keeping your same meter number. You should be able to vend through the different channels you've been doing. If you go to your mobile money app, you'll find the Airtel, MTN, Payway options. The only difference is that you'll not see the UMEME option. You'll see UEDCL option, UEDCL Lite. But remember, UEDCL has already been a service provider. So the question about their competence, I think, shouldn't arise. When UMEME took over 20 years ago, at the same time, there was the Rural Electrification Agency that was set up in 2003. And the Rural Electrification's job was infrastructure development of the distribution line around the country. Most of these lines, over 6,000 kilometers of line, possibly more, that were built by Rural Electrification Program, most of them were rejected by UMEME, that those are not commercially viable places. So government had to find a solution. Judith seems quite surprised. So the rest of the country, places like Bundibujo that had never had power since independence, Padera, Bim, Kitgum, Kalangala, Kanungu, Chibale, there are many parts of the country that UEDCL has been running. Actually, Kanungu and Chibale was first run by FADSALT Infrastructure, and I've seen claims that UMEME was the first to introduce prepayment meter. Not at all. Government of Uganda was the first to introduce prepayment meters in the first concession built outside UMEME in Chibale, Kagadi specifically, run by FedSalt Engineering, whose concession ended and the concession was handed over to UEDCL. So there were many parts of the country that had different players. We have 13 service territories where a utility can operate, can be licensed and operate. But at some point, government made a decision for the second generation electricity sector reforms, where we were taking back certain key infrastructure. The realization that some mistakes were made during privatization and the cost of investment in the energy sector is high. So if you hand it over to a private investor, really the burden is on the user. You know, there are often questions about the tariff, why is it so high and things like that. So if someone invests, how do they recoup their investment? So UEDCL took over what we call BEX, which was Bundibujo Electricity Cooperative Society. It took over PACMEX, Padera Beam Electricity Cooperative Society, that covered Padera Beam, you know, those Moroto, those parts of the country. We had Chegegwa Electricity Cooperative Society. The last one they took over last year was Kilembe Investment Limited, that covered areas of Kasese and others, meaning they have been practicing utility provision in electricity. UEDCL is the asset owner, by the way. They are the ones who handed over this network to UMEME 20 years ago. It is, the government are mandated to do utility. So just to give that context, we are confident. But we've also been preparing. Government set up 3 preparatory committees just for the UMEME UEDCL retransfer. So while we come off as unprepared just because of the argument on the buyout amount, we have been preparing. There's been a protracted process of assessing UEDCL, assessing their new structure, assessing if they have what it takes to provide utility service to the country. And they did get a license from ERA, the Electricity Regulatory Authority, that's mandated to do that. So right from the interministerial level, we have a committee chaired by the Minister of Energy and Mineral Development. We have Minister of Finance there. We have the Auditor General in there, all preparing for the handover. We have the Joint Technical Committee that is chaired by the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. We had UMEME in there, UEDCL in there, the Transmission Company in there, OPM in there, National Planning Authority, Electricity Regulatory Authority, the Auditor General, Minister of Finance, all doing what? Since last year, weekly meeting. These committees, especially the Joint Technical Committee, met weekly. And then there was another level, the Retransfer Coordination Committee chaired by UEDCL. This one was purely between UEDCL and UMEME and UEDCL that transmits power. And we've been having discussions on how we are going about that, and we seem to be on the same page until the figures came out on what UMEME would like, what government thinks we should pay based on the projections we made during the contract we made, and then we had the regulator guiding, because they have been supervising that actually when we assess the investments made by UMEME, this is how much we should pay them. And this should have been, to me, a back office organization, because the contract provided for different arbitrary methods that we could use. So for us to come out and issue statements and contradict each other is really unfortunate, and we haven't organized the public, but we can assure the citizens of Uganda that on 31st of March 2025, UEDCL is taking over. We are taking back our network, and we shall serve the people of Uganda. They will access power, they will vend the way they've been doing, they will retain their meter numbers. And those who have applied for power, all that information, we expect UMEME to hand it over. So we should be able to come and serve you. UEDCL has also been a service provider already, with accessories, meters, transformers. So if there is a fault in a formerly UMEME network, they should be able to respond, because now it will be one single company of government of Uganda offering a service. We've had initiatives like the Connections Initiative, the Electricity Access Scale Up project, where we're giving no pole service, or we give free meters and a pole unless you're too far away from the network. Because again, people said I applied for power and I haven't been given. It depends. Do you actually have an existing network? A low voltage network? Is there a transformer near you within a radius of a kilometer? What is the capacity of the transformer? Maybe we need to upgrade, and all these different things, we look at them. But we've also made plans to ensure those things are addressed, because government's mission is electricity for all by 2040. So we are trying to do what it takes. And those are some of the reasons that sometimes a private investor will not appreciate the strategic vision of the country to serve its people, to ensure access. They are using a commercial model, while government is seeking to provide a service for socio-economic development.
Thank you, Dr. Patricia. Honorable Dr. Muhumuza, just your quick thoughts. But Patricia highlights an important issue, the contradictions that we are seeing, or that we've been seeing this week. UMEME says the buyout amount is 234 on Wednesday. A day later, the Attorney General goes to Parliament and says, we have done an evaluation and our assessment says it is $118 million. These contradictions, and that's already what government is going to pay. Of course, minus maybe that 9 point something million dollars, which they're supposed to pay. 9.7.
Not supposed to pay, but subject to assessment. The additional investments, let me just give a quick example. For instance, the Gaba substation, that was part of UMEME's investment plan that was approved by the regulator, had not yet been done. So they are completing that, and those assessments will be done.
So, Dr. Muhumuza, just over to you. Do you foresee a scenario where we go into a contestation?
Yeah, of course, contestations are always there when it comes to valuation of items. Even me and you go through it when we are buying a bunch of banana. The only thing you want to pray is the gap is not that wide. Prices are not point estimates like statistics, they are interval estimates. So even this person will be saying, well, anybody who gives me 40,000, I'll get it. But they will not hesitate to tell you it is 45,000. And then you haggle in between there. So valuation of items will always have that margin, and somebody settles. You go and buy a phone and you've paid this much, and then some other person turns up and has paid less or has paid more. So my prayer is that the gap will not be that wide, so that ultimately both parties will agree, because to pull each other to a certain middle line. Because the items we are dealing with is like buying a second-hand car, even if it is the same year. It depends on what that car has been doing on the market. So you cannot strictly come and say this transformer was bought in 2022, it has served for 3 years, this is the price that is left of it. It depends on the conditions that it has been subjected to. And that can be a contested space. I was discussing with an accountant yesterday, and we said they were valuing some items. And what do you do with a gadget that is 2G and the world has moved to 5G? You as a person, you'll say, but my phone still works, so you have to pay. But this guy is like, no, I am buying it, I'm going to a country which uses 5G. So I give it a zero price. I can't use it. We have seen plots in Nakasero being bought. People are putting up high-rise. Now, what do you want to value that house sitting on that plot? I'm only buying a plot. But you who is selling, you want to say, but there is a house on the plot. That house is actually an encumbrance to me. I have to destroy it and carry away the garbage. Now, those are the things that are going to come into the situation. And that's why I'm saying my prayer is that the margin is not that wide so that it can easily be resolved. That's number one. Two, I'm hoping there are enough transitional measures that while that haggling is happening, you know, when we go for introductions, the elders go to negotiate about how many cows in Honorable Ruzindana's territory. While they are negotiating there, for us we are eating. And I think that's what Patricia's concerned, that I can still buy my yaka and get it. Last night I didn't have power. I hope it wasn't some of these transitional issues. So I couldn't set my exam for my students, and I promised them. Hope I'll get some time to. Those are the kinds of things that me and you don't want to
go through. Exactly.
Now, it is okay for me. I would just sleep if there is no power. But what about this manufacturer who has to make sure bread is in the trucks at 3 a.m. because he needs to deliver the supermarkets before it opens for the public at 6? That guy, that is his business. So you find those encumbrances. I've met a manufacturer, I think, in Namamve. Namamve, we're told, is an industrial park, roads, water, electricity. This guy is going to invest $3 million in an energy generation system inside Namamve. Because you see Namamve is lit up. The manufacturer, it is to that detail. The fluctuations, it's not stable. I'm doing process, can it be stable?
Those are huge losses for them, yes.
$3 million that is going to put into a place where he was invited, that everything is free. Now, these are signals as we transition from UMEME into UEDCL. Those assurances, as I said earlier, to those investors who create the jobs, who run the economy, who save us on imports, who generate for us exports, is the ultimate thing. And that's why I'm saying the committees, you can see they are all in place, but things are still not adding up. So what do government committees do? And I've been in some of them. And sometimes we discuss, you take tea, you write documents, and the report is shelved. No action points, no disciplinary measures to say
just out of curiosity, Doctor, when you look at 234 versus 180 million, that's a difference of $100 and something million.
Yes.
What would actually lead to such a huge margin of figures? I mean, just you may not know the entire details, the technical issues and so on, but just from an economic point of view, and you've done a lot of consultancies also in the energy sector, what would actually lead to this kind of figure? Some people, because there's a thinking among a lot of Ugandans, we are a corrupt country, that's a fact. We lose a lot of money in dubious, shady deals and so on. People are getting kickbacks, and these are some of the questions that Ugandans are, question marks that Ugandans are having. Could it be that there's foul play, there's a clique of people who are actually inflating figures to maybe get their kickbacks at the end of the day? And or is this purely technical?
It could be both. That's why I've said we have not seen the report and the methodology used. Because for me as a researcher, methodology is everything. An engineer will ask you, what structure do you want to do? If you want to go 7 floors up, that determines how far deep down they should go to lay the foundations. So methodology is everything for me, and I would want to see what methodology they have used. It can be contested, but at least you have a margin. And she has really explained that this agreement had everything in place, that we shouldn't have been here. Investments would be done by UMEME, ERA would be involved, you would be able to assess them. So by now we should be ending up at a point where ERA gives us a figure, which they have already been working on with UMEME anyway, because they didn't do any investment that ERA would not certify and agree on and monitor and watch. We shouldn't have been at this point. We should have been debating the last 3 months maybe, saying, okay, in the last 3 months, what have you done? And I know government, I think, told UMEME, don't do many other investments as you get closer to the concession to really make this figure manageable. But at that point, we should have triggered UEDCL to say, now continue investing in your own infrastructure. Because now UEDCL is also inheriting a very big gap of investment that has not been done over a period of time. So you want to manage those cases. So the wide variation should not have come up. It speaks to the history of how we have not managed the process very well. I've seen at least one presidential letter of 2018 saying the concession will not be renewed. So we had 7 years literally of notice that the principal has said UMEME is going out. You begin to wind up that process early enough. You ladies, you give birth. 9 months are coming. You begin prepare early. This human being is coming out. How will I get to the hospital? You make all those calls. When that baby comes out, which clothing are they going to have? You plan. Because it's not a shock to us. We have known it, we need, so it really speaks to our capacity to manage systems that run the economy, that run the system. We talked about the floods. We always know what will come in March. It's the geography I learned in senior 1. That the sun is overhead the equator, and when the sun comes, intertropical convergence zone, where the sun is, the rain comes. So we knew it was coming, but we have not planned for all those kinds of things. So it speaks to a lot of institutional weaknesses and challenges and capacities, and these are going to continue even with UEDCL. I'm even more worried for UEDCL, knowing the government unpaid bills to UMEME. Now UEDCL might not even have the capacity to come to government and say, Mr. Minister, the Minister of Energy hasn't paid. This is your supervisor. There are many things that are going to come through, so for me the transition happens, but our inherent weaknesses in managing public sector issues is my biggest worry as we get out there. UMEME, of course, would come and invoice Muhums. I would pay, it's prepaid. Now you may find even some people going off the prepaid because they have to pay in advance. So they will go off and say, let me get the real one, because there I can tell those guys I have dogs, I have a security guard at the entrance, the pole after all for disconnection is in my house, in my compound, but you don't come here. It is that governance aspect that really we are going to be watching, and as researchers we have work to do, not just for any other purpose, but to inform the future as it goes on, and there is a history to learn from.
Thank you. Honorable Ruzindana, yes.
2 points first. One, I was against the agreement from the very beginning because it was essentially ESCOM we were hiring, and ESCOM has got huge problems back home. It was a system designed for a small population, and when the Africans got onto the system, it got overloaded, and it is a failing system. And you get a failing system to come and help, it becomes a problem. And that's why conceptually I have problems about their capacity to invest when they don't have any capacity to invest back home. I did have that difficulty, and so I am actually happy that it has ended. Now it's the ending we are dealing with. Whether it is a happy one or not, I don't know. Now the ending, when you see what is provided for, if the payment is done, the end comes. If the payment is done by our side, at the end, and yet this should be a process. Patricia has said there has been a process, and that makes me a bit comfortable. Because one, I have some experience that UMEME has some capacity. In my village, my supplier of electricity is UEDCL, and in Kampala it is UMEME, and I don't find much difference.
Thank you, Honorable.
I did actually write a tweet about it. I said, look, I see people having doubts about the capacity of UMEME.
Of UEDCL.
Of UEDCL. But my experience over a few years is that they have been performing as well as UMEME here in Kampala. Now, whether they can replicate that nationally depends on how prepared they have been, and whether, for example, especially for most domestic consumers are on Yaka, and whether they have prepared to transfer the data or smoothly, so that we don't have any disruption. When my Yaka expires, I want to be able to replenish it and so on. Now, I do think that the figures which we have are figures for negotiation purposes. I don't think they are final either way. This is what they should. The Auditor General's one and the UMEME one. There were many things already problematic in the agreement. The technical losses, for example, and some of them should have been reduced by the introduction of YACA, because and then of course there was a guarantee of 20% profit in the agreement. I don't know how one would have agreed to that type of thing. Well, who makes 20%?
It's where we want to attract an investor.
but who makes 20%?
But isn't government giving us 18-19% on treasury bonds? We are making that profit from government.
And then originally you saw huge losses of 30-something% and so on. They're reducing arbitrarily and then rising arbitrarily, and they were part of the tariff. So what I would expect with UEDCL is that with the reduction of these losses, then the tariff should go down for everyone. Then over time I noticed something which I hope this transfer will correct. The small industries which are not big enough to get a three-phase transformer do not benefit from industrial tariff. They pay commercial tariffs. I hope with UEDCL coming in and government, this should be alleviated. When I retired, I tried to be active and set up a small bakery, and found I had to pay a commercial tariff.
Yes.
Not because so that and most of the small industries are in that category. Now I hope UEDCL will have the capacity to deal with that type of thing, because a commercial tariff can put you out if you are a small scale producer.
The policy person is here with the policy issues.
We are going to direct it so she will respond. Yes.
No. So there are the other things that now, from what I have heard Patricia talk about, is really operational, making UEDCL probably more effective than what we have had with UMEME, but also for everyone a cheaper tariff. Tariff. People may not know that the street lights have a tariff of their own, and lots of streets are lit in this country, and those are some of the things that should come with the transfer to UEDCL. But otherwise, as to capacity, I don't have any quarrel with it. As to the end of the agreement, that one should not. Is something I have been hoping for quite a long time. Now, in the negotiations, there will be many things to negotiate, and part of them are the bills of government. I think most of those which are unpaid are bills of government agencies and departments and so on. And government should make it easier for UEDCL if in the budgeting process they budget for a way of liquidating all these outstanding, so that UEDCL does not start with losses from the very beginning because of the debts of government, and then become unable to reduce the tariffs, because the tariff is a problem. It causes many problems. There is a lot of theft of electricity, and the theft probably one of the causes is the high tariff, so that people are looking for a way of accessing electricity. But the thefts must be reduced, and to reduce them, you need to deal with the tariff. And then finally, I think we should not now the generation capacity is a little higher than our requirements. We should not rest. There must be more investments in the sector because our population is growing very fast. The movement to the urban areas is growing very fast, and yet there must also be electricity in the rural areas, and so on. So we should now try and see how we end the situation of electricity wires passing over people who are not getting electricity. Because this is what is happening in most of the country. The wires are passing and you have no electricity. They are passing over you. And that is a situation we should really end.
That's like planes pass over us.
No, but this one is near you. You are seeing it, and even the pole may be on your land, and it's here, and you are getting this. This is something that the domestication of ownership should help us to overcome.
Well, thank you very much. It's time for us to take a break, and then when we return, we continue looking at what is at stake as we switch from UMEME to UEDCL. This is VPN. My name is Judith Atim. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back from the break, and we are continuing with our discussion. Dr. Patricia, Honorable Rosindana raised a number of interesting issues addressing technical losses, the high tariffs, and also the rapid urbanization. But I also want us to go back to that letter that Dr. Muhumuza referenced earlier, the 2018 letter that was written by President Museveni to the Ministry of Energy, addressed specifically to Honorable Irene Muloni at the time, in which he raised a number of questions. Of course, he says, I'm writing to you in connection with the UMEME concession. This concession apparently was messed up by certain elements in your ministry. It is that messing up that is responsible for the high tariffs or prices that Ugandans are still paying for electricity. The cheating started with fraud of inflating the magnitude of the technical and commercial losses. The Auditor General had calculated the two categories of losses to be 28% in 2005. Then all of a sudden, a delegation of Ugandans went to the USA and mysteriously, together with the investors, hiked the magnitude of the technical and commercial losses to 38%. When General Salim Saleh wrote his investigative report in 2009, again, mysteriously, the losses parachuted back to 28%. Of the 28%, about 15% were technical losses caused by old wires. 13% were commercial losses caused by the non-collection of debts by Uganda Electricity Board. Since that time, commercial losses have shrunk to only 1%, while technical losses have climbed to 17.3%. Yet the investors claim to have invested $500 million in the distribution infrastructure. If they have invested so much money, why do the technical losses not decline? Then there was also the second question, also, were the technical losses not supposed to have been eliminated? Of course, it says there is the incredible provision of guaranteeing the profits to the investors of 20%, which again must be collected from the tariff. The alleged investments account for 22% of the price of electricity, and the losses account for 26% of the price, while the technical losses not supposed to have been eliminated. Just very quick. I don't know what the position of the ministry has been, or what the responses were to the questions that the president presented at that time. I know you've been at the ministry for quite a short time, but were these responses actually provided?
Yes, of course. When the president makes certain inquiries, we prepare a response and submit. And I'm not at liberty to discuss everything, but from what we are providing at the moment, you can see, or what we're going through at the moment, you can see there is a response to what the president directed. of course, culminating into not renewing
the concession.
That was one of his strongest messages, that you should not renew this concession. And that is why we are here talking about this retransfer of the assets. The issue of losses, that's on a technical assessment. I really wouldn't want to speak to that because there's a whole dynamic on how these technical losses are made. But there are many different reasons for losses or challenges, why there are outages, which is part of the reason people are making a lot of noise. Also, there's been that process of preparing UMEME to, rather UEDCL to take over from UMEME. So these actions speak to the fact that, yes, the ministry did pay attention to what His Excellency directed, and we had to provide a response, a mechanism on how we are going to implement this directive. And as you can see, we are implementing this directive. Now, some of these, as Honorable Ruzindana said earlier, was some aspects that we agreed to and signed off in the contract. So unfortunately, we've got to comply with what we put in the contract. Some of them could have been avoided, but we signed to them. And really, that is the challenge always with legal provisions. But I would also like to speak to the aspect of the quality of the network that he refers to, and all my other colleagues have referred to. At the moment, what we see at the moment is that Uganda actually has an old network. Much as there's been investment, mostly by government, you'll find, for instance, maybe government is moving electricity from Lira to Moroto and Kotido. These are lines of over 250 kilometers. These are investments purely done through Ministry of Energy. And then these networks are handed over to a service provider. But in the middle of this new network and where power is generated, you find that it's an old network. So while at this end I have a new network, sometimes it overwhelms the old network that also needs to be refurbished. For instance, what we've been having at the moment where the network, let me speak about Kampala, for instance, Kampala, Wakiso, Mpigi, the surrounding area. The network is overwhelmed because there's growing, immense growth. When UMEME took over, of course, the figures are always contested. Like Dr. Alia said, some documents say access was at 1%, others say 10%. But at least we agree that right now we have a 63% access, part of it that is on renewable. But for grid electricity, access is 23%. There's so many neighborhoods, housing estates, factories. We've created industrial parks. But I think it was Honorable Ruzindana or Doctor who said earlier, we need to synchronize our planning. So while we have these growth centers, have we engaged with Ministry of Energy that there's an industrial park here? He's just revealed how an investor that had been assured of water and electricity, and I think the planning, I remember I was at Rural Electrification Agency, and we had those meetings of industrial parks, and we actually packaged projects for industrial parks. One thing that was not done is to do a load assessment. Maybe it was difficult. We're attracting investors, but we don't know what investor is coming, the capacity of load he needs. So maybe I'll put a 50 kVA. And maybe one factory, only one needs a 200 kVA. So you're already here, you've been assured of water and electricity, and suddenly you find there's 100 kVA or 200 kVA, and you're over 10 industries. And one industry, only one needs what is available or more. So I think these are some points of synchronization we need to make with Uganda Investment Authority. When you're approving these investments, do you engage all the different stakeholders who are talking about the drainage and things like that? Do we work with the NEMA? You find NEMA approves a lot of these things. Do we actually check these approvals? Do we monitor these approvals? Do we actually ensure compliance to these ESGs? So those are some of the things that we need to do. So as we speak, part of the challenge is we had a lot of substations that were overwhelmed. For instance, when UMEME started refurbishing in the last 1 month the Gaba substation, an investment that we should have done earlier, The load was shifted to Mutundwe. Mutundwe could not handle the load. So there was an outage. We had to quickly find a solution, move our transformers from elsewhere. Now, these are details we don't come to discuss. It is a live network. People expect a service. So you can't be right in the middle. Now we're turning left, now we're turning right. People just want power. People just want electricity to cook, to charge their phones, to make produce, and so on and so forth. You know, like you said, it's a catalyst. It is a resource that everybody needs at the health center, education, industries. When power goes off, like when the flood goes, a huge part of the country experienced an outage because with all these tree fallings and things like that, the network collapsed. So unlike a road where you're going to cut off the tree that fell and people can access, we have to replace a cable. Do we have it readily available? Which kind of cable it is? We have different kind of cables and things like that. And you find that these cables sometimes when they're snapping, they might pull the pole with it. You know, it can be a bit more complicated than merely that. So the load has really grown. We have insufficient capacity. Those are things that government is investing in as we speak, and we hope we shall reinforce this to ensure UEDCL is a better service provider. In the northern part of Uganda, especially Kiriandongo, places like Abim, Kitgum, this bushfire. That's the way they've always traditionally cleared land for agriculture. So many times they burn up the infrastructure and power goes off. The cable melts, the pole falls, they've burnt them. So these bushfires, like, we really need to find a way of addressing them. And one of the ways is that government has moved to concrete poles. And we started this in northern Uganda because that is where most of the bushfires came from. But it also means we can give enough time to the trees to grow. Based on that duration. You know, people always ask, why is it that the older poles seem to have longer shelf, yes, than the newer ones, because we're using GMO'd trees. They reach the diameter so quickly and we never thought about the tissue inside and things. This is the size of pole we need. But later we realized that it's not just about the size of the pole. It's also about the density, yes, and things like that. So there are those alternatives that government already started implementing and should go big scale. And these are also opportunities that provide employment because we have so many concrete pole plants that have come up and they're employing people. So I will maybe speak to that later, the outcry of job losses and things like that, which I'll come to shortly. Let me just talk about this last point of why we're having challenges, the aspect of vandalism and theft on the network. I don't know what has happened, especially the transmission lines. My goodness. You find a whole pylon has collapsed. Like 2 years ago, we had that incident in Mukono, and the whole country is cut off. So remember that, unfortunately, for you to enjoy power in your house, there's that value chain. It is generated, it is transmitted, it is distributed through the transformers, then it reaches you. So if the transmission line is cut off, you're going to go off. If a generation plant is going to go off, you're going to go off. So we just ask people to support on community policing. These are your things. And when power goes off, we all suffer. Hospitals, health, industries, in our homes. So we should be vigilant. And I think there should be a more punitive measure. Government has tried to put more punitive measures, but should be more vigilant about that. So during this transition, unfortunately, we also had a lot of theft and vandalism. But everyone was like, oh, UEDCL. But UMEME is still the service provider until midnight. 31st. So maybe just quickly on the issue of the human resource that has been one of the contentions in the public conflict. How many people have lost jobs? Government started the rationalization over 2-3 years ago. And I remember when rail electrification was shutting down, so many people lost jobs. Rail electrification had 250 members of staff. I was one of them. I was home for 2 years. Nobody cared what I was doing. Why are we making so much noise about UMEME? UMEME had slightly more than 2,000 members of staff. Only 150 haven't been taken. UEDCL has already absorbed 2,068. Actually, as of yesterday, it was 2,300 members of staff that UEDCL has absorbed. But we are making noise about the 150. We're not looking at the over 2,000 that have been absorbed. So it's not as bad in terms of percentages. it's not as bad as some of the other government institutions that have closed, like UNRWA. What has happened to the members of staff? Yes? Why are we making so much noise about a private investor who had a shelf life of 20 years, and it's time for us to reclaim our property? So government has taken that into consideration. Maybe the last issue I would like to speak to before you ask me another question is the issue of shares, which is I think, one of the things people have been challenging government. These are Ugandans that bought shares in UMEME. What are you doing about this? Those in this business or investing in this business need to understand how these listings work. So if you buy a share, and I don't know if they knew that UMEME had a shelf life of 20 years as they were buying those shares, there are mechanisms on what happens, on how you get back your money. We have what do they call that authority that deals with
capital markets?
Yes,
Capital
we have Capital Markets Authority.
Mm-hmm.
There are mechanisms in place. And so that's an issue, government. Yes, we pay attention, and there are those bodies that deal with that. But people want to fault that to Ministry of Energy. But you made a decision to invest in this area. Were you aware about the investment risks you are taking? That should be appreciated, and there's a mechanism. So if UMEME comes out and makes an announcement to its shareholders that if they don't give us the buyout amount, maybe we shall not be able to pay you back, I think that's unfortunate, because this is a listed company. There are mechanisms on how you recoup back your money, and if the company closes, there are mechanisms on how to address that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Muhumuza, I don't know what you want to add.
Yeah, just to give assurance to the people, the shareholders. And they have, I think, an annual general meeting, which is their meeting, the shareholders in May. And I think they have put it in May to make sure by then there will be a good message to give to the shareholders. But that's the beauty when you let systems work. When you buy into a listed company, it's not just these people to sit and decide what to give, what no. You are members, you are owners of the company, and so they will give this. And they have been watching. But also the good thing is they were given assurance, because I've seen the share value of UMEME has been going up even after announcement of the closure. It means people trusted the systems. The systems are in place. Otherwise, they would have sold and run away, because that was one exit way. If you see uncertainty in this listed company, you sell and go. But in this case, people left their shares there, so they are trusting at least that part of the system. They know the legal team of UMEME and the administration of UMEME will fight and do the best to secure at least their interest in the payout that is coming out. So that seems to be working out very well, and I said many people watching those spaces. There are a few things you want to watch in the energy sector, and I think this gives us an opportunity to really do the comprehensive assessment of the energy sector. As she has mentioned, every time my power goes off, UMEME. Sometimes it's the transmission. Somebody cut a pylon. The UMEME is buying from the UEDCL. Now, if UEDCL has a problem because some people vandalized its transmission system, we are all going to come down to blame UMEME. And UMEME has been there to explain it was the face of the energy sector, really. Whether the power was at generation, at Isimba, wherever, they are the ones we see, they are the ones we ask questions. And that's part of what they have been doing very well. To give us the assurances and give the explanations. The hotspots are running, and it's my prayer that UEDCL will be enabled and allowed to keep that system running, to keep face with the people and then communicate to them. There are other issues that when you get into a market space, Honorable here talked about people who see power lines passing over them. And there were all these projects that government decided and said, one connection, if you have one pole, if you don't have a pole, we'll just connect you. Sometimes the real cost of getting electricity to a house is in the wiring of your own house. That's not a cheap process. Buying those sockets from Kiyembe, wiring, earthing, and they have a very clear criteria. They will come and test because they don't want to burn your house. Now I see so many houses that are not even eligible for electricity. So I've been telling people we are using wrong indicators to say 80% of the country is not connected. It's not about a connection problem. It's the state of the houses. Can you give me the type of houses that qualify to be connected so that we have a good base we are using? A grass thatched, if it's a cottage, it's a different story. But the grass thatched houses that I've seen along different roads, I don't want to mention them. But even the iron sheet roofed houses I've seen in Western Uganda, they are not eligible for connection to begin with, but they are homesteads. They are part of the 10 million households or homes that your bureaus of statistics would count. But you want to remove those from the base of saying who is now connected before you go and ask UEDCL. We want you to increase connection rates to 60% or 80% of Ugandans. There are those even UEDCL will advise and say, sorry,
this don't
this
qualify.
one we cannot connect because it doesn't qualify. But also there are those who qualify, but the cost of you wiring your house to prepare for that connection can go up to 2 million, can go up to 1.5 million. Now your own house, you struggle to find 7 million to build it. Where do I find the 2 million to do the wiring in order for me to get connected? So we are not using the right indicators, and I hope ministry will take up this so that UEDCL is not blamed for what they can't do, but also to inform policy and guide these processes to say how many Ugandans can connect. I mean, you have seen blood collection here. Some people go and they are turned away. Thank you for your offer, but please, when we see you need to go first and eat some more dodo, and you are anemic yourself. So you don't just speak from everybody who has turned up. You have age, or you have an underlying condition. I mean, let's bring these realities to play. So when you see some houses not connected, and I hope this won't be given to UEDCL that you must connect every town in Uganda.
Yes, maybe that's where I just want to give some bit of information, is that there's a low-cost connections model called a Ready Board that government has introduced, and we've used it for over the last 15 years. So it is a board, literally. So any kiosk, markets, one-roomed places, those kind of places that ideally, traditionally wouldn't be eligible in the old system, we have a Ready Board. This is a board where they put for you a bulb point, a socket point, a circuit breaker, and you just mount it. It costs 150,000. We normally give it through our service providers, literally 150. So all you have to do is the earthing, and then they install this for you. So we don't allow people to manufacture the Ready Board themselves. We want to manage the standard. So that is how we are trying to address those temporary structures and markets and one-roomed houses to just cut down the cost. So government is aware of those challenges, and that is the middle ground we've reached at the moment. I just thought I needed to say that.
Yeah, which is good, but as you've said, that 100,000
150,000.
150 for a person who that is their monthly salary. Remember the people who sweep our streets, we pay them 180,000. Now, if you save to build, you have school fees to pay, you have medical bills. Even that is out of reach for some people.
Yes, true.
And there are many in our country. But also added to that is the message you want to give, which is sometimes politically driven. Every town must be connected. Now, I've had conversations with UMEME people to say, how much money do you collect from these different towns? And you'll find, because now we even have energy savers, these efficient gadgets. So even where you have 2,000 people collected, and all they are doing is charging their phones and using that 3-watt bulb, they eventually pay you 5,000 a month, and it's sufficient for them, and it's okay. But does it make a business case for me to connect that whole town and put a manager who is going to be paid a certain salary, rent, other staff, operational costs in that particular town where I collect a total of 4 million per month? Now, UMEME had the privilege of following that business case because it's a private sector led and will be informed by where is the business case. We are not saying they shouldn't be connected, but you want to plan it. Don't say by 2028 everybody must be connected. Have you beefed up their business to make it a viable case for a connection? So we are going to see UEDCL possibly being driven by the political ambitions. We are going into an election, and I'm going to hear all that kind of talk. My area has no electricity. My area is not connected. But does it make sense? So you might see UEDCL go into areas where a business case is not, and those will begin to raise the cost on them, because you have to subsidize that particular town from what you are collecting in Kampala, what you are collecting in Jinja, and it eats into the savings you thought you would plow back into the investment. So it's a very complex process that the transition we are going into. People need to look at UMEME's lessons with kindness and with objectivity to say what lessons do we need to carry Because we have grown the sector. They have grown these numbers to 2.5 million. It's not easy because you must have an efficient system. For us to call and say, my power is off, come and connect. All those 2,000 people you have absorbed, what was the work environment? What was the facilitation? You might find you get to a level, you have the staff, a pole is broken down, there is no vehicle to go there. There is no fuel to reach there. Where is my field allowance? Because now I'm going on duty which is failed. All those dynamics we need to draw lessons from, and by the experience of public sector institutions, I don't see a lot of that being easily run. It's not that the people in UEDCL are not able. I've had conversations with them and I know they are very efficient, but my worry is the conditions within which you operate. People don't go to this Nakasero Hospital and IHK because they are good doctors. They are the same doctors you'll find in Mulago. But IHK puts a structure in place that if we need this, we'll get it with the urgency that cannot come from a public sector. And that comes with a premium. So really for me, I have no doubts about UEDCL as an entity and as individuals. My worry is on the environment. That context is really needs to be watched, needs to be managed, because it's going to be a big problem to them. And of course, talking about the whole energy sector, remember we signed, because people think UMEME is responsible for the tariff. You really, when you break down, UMEME is responsible for possibly, the shareholders of UMEME take 5% of that tariff. The bulk of the money goes to pay the generators, those who generate the power, those who transmit the power. Part of it is taxes. Let's not forget there is 18% VAT. So every time you pay 700, 18% is URA. But people think, oh, this is UMEME stealing us and cheating us, and how did we get here? And we also made very bad agreements at the generation level, which are driving the tariff. These power purchase agreements based on capacity. I have built a 25 megawatt plant, but the water levels have fallen. I can't even generate 7 megawatts, but you have to pay me for 25 because that's what you paid for. So if I bring a bus, a 64-seater, and you only have 7 people, you pay for the other seats. Those are the agreements we made. Now, you're not making any money out of that capacity, but you have to pay for the capacity. And all that bill comes from the upstream and ends up in the tariff. And we have to carry it. Now, we blame UMEME. So I don't think anybody should promise that the entry of UEDCL is going to lower the tariff. Can we be slow on that promise?
Okay.
Because it's not determined at that level. It's determined by system-wide, very many agreements all over the place, which are bad, but also the realities of water is not here, energy consumption has not grown. I mean, a lot of things, and I think let's prepare a document to prepare the public. Because now you are giving them the impression, UMEME was responsible for high tariff. Once it goes out, you guys are going to pay 400. We've even promised manufacturers, we give you 5 US cents. The cost of generating electricity in this country is 9 to 11. So who is subsidizing those manufacturers? Me and you. And as he said, who are charged a commercial rate, even when you are running a school or a bakery, you are on a domestic rate. There are issues to resolve, and I'm glad we'll be part of this.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me move to you, Doctor. Honorable.
Well, I think most of the systemic things have been addressed by my colleagues. I could talk about the consumer interests. On the consumer interests, I think there is a problem about fault detection, and I think that one should be addressed. Even when you alert the provider, the response time quite often is a bit problematic. So that one needs to be addressed. Fault detection, response time. Then there is something that has got to be reviewed with the electricity authority as well. The service charge. The service charge under UEB and UMEME, when there were manual bills and delivery and so on, the service charge would be justified. But when you are on Yaka, of course there is they come if there is a fault and so on. But what is the service charge for? And you find if you are buying Yaka and it overflows into another month and so on, you will still be, it is monthly, and I think that one, the service charge needs to be reviewed. At least those on Yaka, really there is no justification for the fixed service charge. There are no bills to deliver. There are no disconnection charges. There are no, the other ones are systemic. What you pay for. So that one should be. Of course, it is with the authority that the charges and so on are fixed. Then I think if the commercial and the technical losses are dealt with, there should be a possibility of reducing the tariff. Of course, the generation costs are there, and the distribution costs and so on. Losses are unavoidable. The wires lose along the way. That one, it is inevitable. But I think that there are things that can be reduced. Then there is community programs that need to be carried out. There are thefts of transformer oil and such things. Really, there is need for communities to be alert. If you see someone going up, you find the street lights. They steal something on the pole, and then the street lights cannot work, and that needs a lot of alertness by the community. And then for the personnel, for example, in UMEME, we now have experience. We have seen people, I think, of coffee marketing board and those defunct agencies who are still demanding their dues. Now we should have had experience by now, so that those people who are not going to be absorbed, there should be a way of there should have been a system of dealing with them, and so that people and they are technical and they have experience. We can't say we have a saturation of technical people to have technical qualified people being laid off for a very long time. They should be absorbed very quickly. They are used to be a manpower department of government in the Ministry of Planning a long time ago, which no longer is there. But there is now rationale for reviving it, so that we have somewhere where there is a register of
a repository of the human resource capacity that we have as a country.
Some countries have them internationally. That's why you see there are people placed in international organizations and so on. But even nationally, we should have them, so that if a person is laid off, but at a district level they need, or at another agency like Ministry of Health, they need a technical person there, then he's placed quickly. UMEME as a listed company, I hope this doesn't mean that that is the end of it and so on. We have very few channels of investment. The Ugandans are not very active on the stock exchange. In some other countries, people are active, and this one had attracted quite a number of investors. I hope they are not going to lose out, because I think they shouldn't lose out. But we probably should look into another way. You know, even if an agency is publicly owned, you could still find a way of having the public invest in it. When there is no interest in it, there is a time I went to Ruero somewhere, and pylons were down. I said, but was there sabotage? Because putting down a pylon is not an ism. It's not an ism. I said, how did this? There were about 3. And I said, how can this have happened? I asked, and they said they had been down for quite some time. I said, wow. But how do pylons have come down? Unless there was sabotage. There is no guerrilla. So who would have? There is no guerrilla in this area. So who would have sabotaged them? And so you do find the public react as if they have no interest in something public. And then there is something which Dr. Mumza has mentioned. My neighboring small town has no electricity, and they complain.
Which one is that?
No, we're in my village. There are very many small towns. And I asked, there are no people who have wired their homes. So how will connection take place? How is a transformer going to be put there? You can't just put a transformer hoping that there will be people to connect. They must connect. They must wire their houses and then inspected and so on. And this is not clearly known. And people will complain, why is so and so wired having electricity and I don't have? Yeah, but now these are things. Now that it has become becoming a public corporation in charge, there must also be creation of awareness on what is required for someone to have electricity in his home, and also to continue having it. You must pay bills if you are not connected on your car. If you are connected on your car, you must also be renewing your subscription and so on. So there is a need to create awareness.
Yes, I agree.
There is a need to about certain things, and otherwise, I really don't have.
Patricia, we're going to take a break. If you could just hold that thought a little bit and then we return. But also, if you're listening, we shall be opening our phone lines for you to participate. But we just want to know what your anticipation is. What do you expect from 1st April when UEDCL, a government entity, takes over managing and the distribution of electricity? The numbers to call are 0393 933 933, 0393 262 933, 0393 262 934, 0393 266 933, 0701 933 934, 0751 933 900 after the break. Welcome back from the break. We're still talking about what is at stake as we count down to the switch from UMEME to UEDCL. And before we took the break, Honorable Dr. Patricia, I wanted to give you the microphone to respond to the submissions that had been made already by your colleagues.
Okay.
Before we take the calls,
I'll just touch on maybe 2-3 issues of why it's necessary for government to be in charge of the infrastructure. As you realize, or as already expressed, the initial cost of investment to access power is high. But once you are connected, then what you spend monthly is more friendly. So it's like, normally grandchildren or children would buy their parents very expensive phones. If the parent had an option, they would buy the kabiriti. So they keep loading and things like that, and they just need one function. So equally, while government is pushing for universal access, how many people are actually able to afford the initial cost of connection. And that's why government has come in to subsidize by offering the few connections and things like that. But also, we need people to demonstrate willingness to pay. Sometimes when everything is given to you completely free, you take it for granted. So we expect people to be able to wire their houses. Now, it depends on the size of your house sometimes, but we encourage people to use the ready board approach, where you go progressively. You can start with a ready board, then wire one room, then wire the next. Hopefully you phase out things, because remember, access to power is competing against, I think Doctor said that earlier, competing against other needs. School fees, food at home, water bills, and so on and so forth. But that's why government has come in to give that subsidy. But also, sometimes maybe when we try to say there's something government is calling intensification and densification, where we build an infrastructure, but it is along the road. Yes, and people are like, why aren't you entering the villages and things like that? So, we come back, injecting more transformers, extend the line and things like that, so that everybody within can access. So, of course, when you do that, also the transformer capacity has to be upgraded. And we've had cases where we take lines to places, and 4 years later, maybe this is even just 20 kilometers, and years later, you find that very few people have connected. So, like we said, we are going to yet another transitional phase of politics, change of leadership, or the same ones are coming back, and the push and demand for electricity is normally one of the demands from electorate. So people promise that we shall bring electricity, but what is the process of bringing electricity really? Does this member of parliament even have the mandate? Let's say he has the resources. Does he have the mandate to electrify the village? No, he doesn't. Electricity is a sensitive infrastructure. You could electrocute a whole village, just by doing things the wrong way. So just dropping poles is not enough. Is it even a treated pole? What are the measurements? What are the diameters? Where is the last point of access? Where is even the last transformers? We've had cases, especially in the Bugisu region, where there would be massive power theft. I don't know, for some reason, maybe because of the technical institution there or some other reason, people seem to have had the technical skill of knowing how to extend power. But also there was a lot of electrocution, because they would use these thin lines that is not so obvious to the eye, pass within.
Until we have a caller. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, please. You have there's a lot of echo and some noise in the background. I don't know if you could move to a quieter place.
I'm just moving on the way.
Can you, because we can't really hear what you're saying, because there's so much noise where you are. Okay, yeah, it's fine. We have another caller. Yes, please. Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Who am I talking to?
You're speaking to Joshua in Katilu.
Who?
Joshua in Katilu.
Yes, Joshua. Yes, Joshua, please.
I want to first thank you for a good presentation and the next show.
Thank you.
I would add on some few words. I begin by thanking UMEME for the great work and great support done to the country. If we really compare what and how Uganda has been in the other days of UEP, there has really a great and real change in the country. Power supply, emergency attendances too, and when you call through, they come a little bit late, but the response is there, and finally they work on you. Coming straight to the UEDCL that is coming in, we really expect a lot, and it is a government entity. As citizens of the country, we expect a lot, and they have to look through and see what UMEME has been doing so that they can begin from there. I would again say the connection fees through, they may be a little bit high, but they are really worth it, because the accessories and all what is used is really expensive. If you go back to the brown costs, all those things, they are really expensive, and adding somebody to the grid because they are high. So I think the government can come in and in support up to the ground, and they should be genuine.
Okay. Thank you. Hello?
Juma is calling from Bukada. Good morning.
Good morning, Juma. What are your expectations as UEDCL takes over from UMEME?
To me, there's no change. Because it's like chain of command.
What?
It is the entry and the exit of every civil servant. It is good. But what is my mind is, Parliament is asking Ministry of Energy to take a proper and neat figure which are supposed to be paid to UMEME. And I remember UMEME signed a contract with the government to run for 20 years. Mm-hmm. So if today there's such a kind of amount of money to be given back to UMEME, meaning that the way they are doing that business with the government, both UMEME and the government need to go for investigation.
Juma, you're not very clear. I'm sorry, we have to drop the call. We'll have to drop. Hello? Let's get another caller.
Good morning, Vivian.
Good morning, man. Who is calling?
My name is Edgar.
Edgar?
Edgar Zenunula. I'm calling you from Bwerenga in Wakiso.
Okay.
I thank all the panelists, and I especially want to talk to Dr. Mhumza. The last time Dr. Mhumza, who I got the opportunity to speak with you, were talking about the question of backbone literature for financial literacy. But we may talk about backbone literature for financial literacy for the ordinary citizen, but we go to the whole country. You talk macroeconomics. I think you and Dr. Suruma are in the same line of thinking. And forgive me, but I will say that, for lack of another way to put it, I'm your follower in you and Dr. Suruma, and I just wonder why you do not get adequate listening to. I don't know where the challenge is, but the challenge is that we tend to talk things that don't make overall long-term sense. Let me give you this example. We are restoring Uganda Airlines, and everybody's excited, Uganda Airlines. The truth is that we've got to make a strategic decision and explain it, that Uganda Airlines may not be able to make money in the first year. It may not be able to make money in the second year. It may not even be able to make that much money overall. But it's a strategic decision because it allows us to position ourselves in a certain way, that we accept that we are going to subsidize it. Mm-hmm. And so we say, where will the money come from? It's the same thing. You come to UMEME, you talked about the tariffs, you talked about where the cost comes from.
We are running out of time. I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut you short as well. Yes, just one caller. Yeah.
If I forget.
Yeah. Then, hello?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, man, who I'm talking to, and you're our last caller because we're running out of time. So just be very specific. Hello?
You're talking to Joe.
Yes, Joe.
Yeah, so, my reason is, it's always best to look on the negative side.
Joe, you're connected. I don't know what the problem is. I think... Hello?
No, it's not UMEME.
Hello?
Yes, please.
I think you can get me now.
Yes, Joe, I can get you now.
Yeah, what I can say, that it's always best to look always on the negative side of the point. But when I go back, I remember power was always a problem here in Uganda. But as I speak now, at least most of the places have at least got some power. I want to give a credit to the partnership between UMEME and the government.
Okay, thank you. And we're actually running out of time. Stephen is already panicking, making me also panic. He's telling me it's just 2-3 minutes for us to sign out.
And
so just
remove the panic from people.
So I'll just need you all to wind up really very briefly. But if you could also just, in your conclusion, if you could just make to react to any of these comments. Of course, people say they have a lot of expectations. Connection fees may be a bit high, but the expectations are certainly high for UEDCL. Juma says he doesn't expect much change. Dr. Muhumuza, your good friend, says you guys have had conversations about, I think, backdoor literature for financial literacy for all citizens and something like that. Just very quickly, Dr. Patricia, then we'll just move here.
My last comment really is to thank our viewers and reassure citizens of Uganda that you will be able to access power. You'll be able to vend. You will keep your meter. You'll keep your customer number. We shall have customer helplines. We shall have the online vending options available. The only difference is that you'll see UEDCL Lite as opposed to UMEME. The back office challenges we are having, we are addressing them, at least from today's New Vision headline that we have paid means that now we are speaking even better beyond yesterday. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Muhumuza.
We will be able to manage about the history on how we got there and why UMEME came in. UMEME was ESCOM and CDC UK. I think Andrew Mwenda made a very good video, which has come out of the behind the headlines. People need to look out for that. And UPC, please, if they can share it out. It explains the history on why these rates went where they went, and it's good for us to draw the lessons. Investing in the energy sector, you should not chase the private sector out. We should give them the incentive, because government can't find the money. It's expensive. We'll lower the costs as we go forward. So let's find a policy environment that really allows the private sector to interface well with UEDCL and everybody else.
Thank you very much. Honorable Rosendana.
Expectations, public expectations are both high and low. And I just wish to challenge those taking over that they should not disappoint us, and they should satisfy our high expectations. Improvements will not be immediate. That one cannot be expected. But there should be improvements, and that's what I would like to request.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Augustine Rosendana, Dr. Patricia Litha, and Dr. Fred Muhumuza, for your insights in the discussion of what is at stake as we switch from UMEME to UEDCL. And to all of you who've been listening and those who've called, we do appreciate you for your contribution. This is VPN. My name is Judith Atim. VPN returns next Saturday. For now, it is bye-bye, and have yourselves a good weekend.